We've just started talking about lab activity number 2 in the respiratory lab. And in lab activity number 2, we ask you to try holding your breath as long as you can. Twice, actually 6 times. So some of you are going to be really good at holding your breath. There are some of you that hold your breath for 30 seconds and tap out. That doesn't matter. We're not grading you on how long you can hold your breath. What we're trying to demonstrate is that the reason that there comes a moment when you feel like you cannot hold your breath any longer, that moment has nothing to do with the amount of oxygen in your blood. It actually has to do with the amount of carbon dioxide in your blood. There is a part of your medulla oblongata that is receiving signals from chemoreceptors out here in the great arteries, in the aortic bodies and in the carotid bodies. And those sensory receptor cells in these two areas, they are tasting the plasma of your blood. And what are they tasting for? Essentially, they're tasting how sour it is. Remember, the taste of sour is the taste of acid. And these chemoreceptor cells are noticing two things: how much carbon dioxide there is in your blood and what the pH of your plasma is at that moment. They are not measuring oxygen. Why? Because oxygen doesn't dissolve well in water, so it's very difficult to measure the amount of oxygen accurately and quickly. But it is very easy to measure CO2 and pH levels, even in the great arteries, accurately and quickly. So the body is designed to measure that. See, your body recognizes that as oxygen levels are going down, 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 simultaneously carbon dioxide levels are going up, 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 up. It's hard to measure this. It's easy for the body to measure that. So the body measures that and then just assumes that the reason your CO2 levels are so high and your pH is low is because you're running out of oxygen. So our lab activity demonstrates that. Remember that you're under control of your breathing, but even when you're not consciously under control of it, it is your central nervous system in the form of your medulla oblongata that is in control of it, right? So the medulla oblongata. Now, the blood chemistry and your respiratory rhythm. What we mean by this is the respiratory rhythm, how quickly you're breathing and how deeply you are breathing, is determined by chemicals in your blood and not by oxygen. Okay, yes, there are some oxygen sensors in the body. They are not important for the regulation of your normal blood, of your normal respiratory rate. What is important? pH and pCO2. In lecture, I will talk about the relationship between CO2 and pH. For right now, just believe me when I say, as those CO2 levels are going up, your pH is getting more acid. So the pH is going down. More hydrogen ions, pH is going down. The peripheral chemoreceptors are found here in the aortic bodies and up here in the carotid bodies, right? So very close to where the baroreceptors sensing blood pressure are located. And those sensory receptor cells, the more acid it is, the faster they fire off action potentials. The medulla oblongata gets a faster action potential signal rate, and it goes, oh my gosh, it's too acid. It's time for me to take another breath. Now, those are the peripheral chemoreceptors. There also are central chemoreceptors, and you need to know the difference. The central chemoreceptors are right in the central nervous system. That's why they're called central chemoreceptors. The central chemoreceptors are right there in the central nervous system. They're actually very close to the medulla oblongata. The central chemoreceptors, the vote they get is an even louder vote, right? If the peripheral chemoreceptors vote no, but the central chemoreceptors vote yes, central chemoreceptors, they win. So let's talk about this activity that you're going to do. And the activity you're going to do, we're going to want you to hold your breath. We're going to want you to try holding your breath as long as you can, 3 times, just the regular way. And then we want you holding your breath 3 times after you've hyperventilated. Look, do yourselves a favor, at least do 1 and 1. So if you're just holding your breath the regular way, this would be you breathing. And the line that I'm making is actually your CO2 levels building up to that, CO2, carbon dioxide levels building up to that. And when your carbon dioxide levels get up to this point, that's usually the moment that your medulla oblongata says, yeah, I better take a breath. And it'll cause you to inhale and exhale, right? And then your body will wait until CO2 levels get up to there again, and then inhale and exhale. Okay? Now, there also is a level way up here, and this level way up here is your I'm gonna die. I don't know if I can write this. I'm gonna die if I don't take another breath. I'm gonna die. This is your like, oh no, I have to breathe right now or else I'm gonna die. Actually, when you think you're gonna die, if you don't take another breath, that's supposed to say die. Hold on. I think I'm gonna die. When you think you're gonna die, that you can't hold your breath a second longer, you're not even close to dying. Most of us can hold our breath for somewhere around a minute, and the world record for holding your breath is more than 20 minutes. For people like, SEAL Team 6 or whatever that are good at holding their breath, they can hold their breath longer than 2 minutes without even trying, right? Here's why you feel like that's the moment when you're gonna die. Where's my pen? There's my pen, okay? So right at this moment, I say, okay, quick, hold your breath and tell me how long you can hold your breath. CO2 levels build up, build up, build up, build up in your blood. And when they get to your, oh no, I'm gonna die, then you feel like you can't hold your breath a second longer. And then you go back to breathing normal again, right? So that's the way things normally would work. I'm just going to tell you right now that there is a question on next week's quiz that is, why can you hold your breath longer after you have hyperventilated? And the answer has nothing to do with oxygen. It's on next week's quiz. Make sure you know this answer. All right. When you hyperventilate, you're either going to breathe more deeply or breathe faster for about a minute. It doesn't have to be exactly a minute. If you're breathing faster than normal or deeper than normal for a while, and if you start to feel even a tiny bit lightheaded, just start holding your breath right then. All right? So here's what happens when you hyperventilate. Do you get more oxygen on your blood? No, you don't, because your oxygen levels on your blood are 100% all the time when they're leaving the lungs. Here's what's going on. As you hyperventilate, you're breathing more deeply or faster here. What you've done is you've driven down the levels of CO2. So now your CO2 levels, as you start to hold your breath, your CO2 levels are way down here. So you start to hold your breath and CO2 levels build up. And I'm trying to make it so that CO2 levels are building up at exactly the same rate that they normally would build up. And you will feel like, oh, I'm gonna die, right at the same place that you did a moment ago. And you will go ahead and take a breath and then go back to breathing normally, right? So after you hyperventilated, you could hold your breath for this long. Sorry. You could hold your breath for this long. Let's say this is a minute and a half, right? Whereas before you hyperventilated, how long could you hold your breath? You could hold your breath from here until there, right? So when you hyperventilate, you drive down the level of CO2 in your bloodstream. There's less carbon dioxide in your bloodstream. So at the beginning of holding your breath, your carbon dioxide levels are so low that it just takes a lot longer to get up here to the point where you feel like you're going to die if you can't breathe. It has nothing to do with oxygen. So make sure you know that for next week's quiz. Too much CO2 in the blood will cause the blood to have a low pH. High blood pH will increase the amount of high blood CO2 will increase the levels of CO2 in the cerebrospinal fluid, so that will make your cerebrospinal fluid more acidic as well. The pH of cerebrospinal fluid is the most powerful stimulus of respiratory rate and depth in human physiology. When children have type 1 diabetes and develop that horrible ketoacidosis thing, they will literally be unconscious and they will be breathing so deeply, it is as if they just ran the 100-yard dash. The reason that happens is type 1 diabetes uncontrolled will cause profound acidosis. And when there is, where's my pen? When there is too much acid in the bloodstream, it'll cause the brain cerebrospinal fluid to be too acid, and it will make them breathe really, really fast. By the way, many of you are interested in becoming nurses. If you're interested in becoming a nurse, you should remember this, that if there's not enough CO2 in the bloodstream, that will keep a patient from breathing. And if there's not enough CO2 in the bloodstream, it will actually cause a patient to lose consciousness, to faint. Remember when people hyperventilate, they faint? If you are going to be working in a medical environment, there are times when you will breathe for a patient. You will manually breathe for them. And it is human nature that if we're breathing to keep someone alive, we feel like more is better. But if you do more breathing for them than is the appropriate amount, you will drive their CO2 levels too low, and you actually will cause their brain to have the constriction of blood vessels that will cause them to faint. They would lose consciousness. So when you're doing CPR on a patient and you're the one responsible for getting them to breathe, do not do it too fast. Too fast is almost worse than not fast enough. All right, that's it. I'll see you at the next lab.